Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ben's World, Come Live in It, where today we'll be talking about the band Queen. Now, if any of you are fans of Queen, this is the episode to watch. So, I thought we would talk about basically how the band started. So, originally the band Queen were called Smile, which was a band that Roger Taylor, who was the drummer of Queen, and guitarist Brian May were in. And at that time, Smile, so I think they were Roger Taylor, Brian May, and a bass player and lead singer, a guy named Tim Staffel. And in the earlier days, they would do like pubs, clubs, and they do like gigs at university. And one day they were doing a gig at a pub, and a young man by the name of Freddie Balsara, and this goes back to before becoming Freddie Mercury. Freddie was a fan of that group, and he would go and watch and support them. And then one day, their lead singer Tim decided to quit the band because he thought they weren't getting big enough, like they weren't becoming successful in a way. So one day the band were backstage, and Tim said to them, "Look, guys, I got to go. Like we're not getting anywhere with this. Like college gigs and pubs. But not long afterwards, Freddie was looking for the band backstage, and he eventually found them and said like to them, "Oh, I've been a huge fan of your group, guys. I've been following you for a while. I write music too, if you're interested." And they said, "You're 5 minutes too late. Our lead singer just quit." And Freddie's like, "Well, you might need a new singer then." And I think Brian said, "Do you have any ideas?" And Freddie said, "Well, what about me?" And Roger, who's probably a bit of a cheeky smartass, he said, "Oh, not with those teeth, mate." And I'm sure most of you know or probably don't know, Freddie actually got teased quite a bit because of his teeth. He had like buck teeth. And but yeah, after when Roger said that, Freddie sang like one of Smile's songs. I think it was a song called "Doing All Right." And they were very impressed with his range, the way he sang. And I think the thing is, if Freddie had got those teeth fixed, he wouldn't be able to sing that operatic range. And so he was born with 4 additional incisors, I think it was, which means more space in his mouth means more range. And then the band, like, they asked him like, "Oh, do you play bass?" And he's like, "No, I don't. I play the piano." So after that, they recruited someone who actually played the bass, a guy named John Deacon. And John Deacon, Freddie took him under his wing. He didn't really say much in the band. He was pretty quiet. But he wrote some good hits, great hits for Queen. And they basically got together, did their first pub gig, and then I think they were still called Smile at the time, actually. So they were called Smile, but they had a new singer, like a new lineup and a bass player. And at that time, Freddie had an idea and said, "Why don't we record an album?" And so they did. And I think their first album might have. Actually, no, I'll go back a little bit. So when they did their first gig at a pub, Freddie then thought of another idea. Thought maybe, well, we can't be called Smile. We need to change our title, our look because we're a new band now. So Freddie came up with the name Queen and also designed their logo as well, which I thought was pretty impressive. Freddie was a man of multiple talents, and some of you may not know, because Queen are a British rock band. Freddie Mercury wasn't actually born in the UK. He was born in Tanzania, in Zanzibar, which is like, I think, near Africa. Yeah. So he was born over there. Had an Indian Persian background, like his, and yeah, and I think Freddie moved to the UK when he was 18 because there was an invasion happening, and I don't know too much about it, but yeah, so that's why Freddie left Zanzibar and moved to the UK with his family, and that's where he met Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon. And he also went to boarding school as well, which, that's something I didn't know about. And anyway, so back to the album. So they recorded their first album. I think it was called. It was just a self-titled album, an album called Queen. And yeah, I think I can't remember all the songs on the album, but I think they that song that I mentioned earlier, "Doing All Right," that was originally written by when Brian May and Roger were in Smile, and they used that for their first album. And I think it was a demo record, where people do like make records and submit them, and try and get the funding to do a better recording. Anyway, about a year later, or maybe a few years later, they released another album, and it was another self-titled one called Queen 2. And that's when people started noticing them. Like, I think they're in the studio and said, someone came in, like someone from EMI Records, and said, like, who are these kids in the box? Like, oh, they're a student band doing some weird stuff. Anyway, so, and someone from EMI that day gave their demo to John Reid, who actually managed Elton John at the time, which I thought was, pretty cool. And yeah, and then they got a record deal with EMI, and I think their manager at the time was John Reid, and he basically said, "Oh, you have a gift, and we want to get you on television." So they got together to record another album. I think it was Sheer Heart Attack for the same year in 1974 as Queen 2. And the song off that album, Killer Queen, that album hit the charts in the US, and that's when people actually started noticing them. Like they made, I think they made big in the US and the UK, and yeah, and they had a meeting for their next album and said, like, well, what are we going to do for the next album? And so I think they decided to go to a farm, like in an isolated area, because they wanted, to really work hard on the next album. Anyway, Freddie started writing this piano riff, which would have been the intro of the classic Bohemian Rhapsody. And Freddie then realized, he's like, I've got it. I've just written probably one of the best songs in rock history. And I'm pretty sure that took days or even weeks to record. And I think they said, oh, like the tape is running out. The song can't take much more. It's too long. Anyway, they eventually recorded it. And when they took it to the record producer, or whoever who was in charge of releasing that record at the time, they said, we're not going to release this song. Like, this song goes more than 6 minutes. Like, we need radio. The format is 3 minutes. We can't have a song like this. And but Freddie knew that it was a masterpiece, and so did the other band. Like, everyone else agreed that this is a big hit. Anyway, they didn't end up releasing it, so that they went to I think Freddie went to Kenny Everett, who had a radio show at the time, and went to talk to him about it. And he's like, what's wrong with this song? And he's like, oh, like nothing's wrong with it at all. It's like 6 minutes long, and the BBC won't play it. He's like, oh, okay, well, let's give it a listen then and see what it's like. Anyway, they listened to that song, and that song brought them all around the world. Like, I'm pretty sure they came to Sydney in, I think, 1975, 76. Yeah, so they would have been touring the world. And basically on from that, that they released albums every single year. As they got bigger, they I think in 1977, they Brian May, who's also a really good songwriter, he would write. He came up with the clap and the stomp for "We Will Rock You," and that made them big as well. Like that they had so many like great songs throughout their career. But yeah, so I think in the 70s, they were pretty big, and the hairstyles and the outfits they wore on stage, that 1970s look. But by the time they reached the 1980s, they so they released they were releasing more music around that time. But I think one day when they were in the studio, Freddie actually wrote. No, not Freddie. Sorry. John Deacon actually wrote this bass riff called "Another One Bites the Dust." He was going dum 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 dum, and they're like, "That's quite a good riff, actually." And they thought, but they didn't want to do it. They thought it was too disco-y. But as soon as they heard that riff, they decided to go with it. But I actually would like to. Do you mind if I show you guys something quickly? I've actually got some interesting props to share with you as well. So over here I've got Queen Greatest Hits, which was an album released I think in 1981, and on the back here it's got like all their songs. Like it's got Bohemian Rhapsody, Another One Bites the Dust, Killer Queen, Fat Bottom Girls, Bicycle Race, You're My Best Friend, Don't Stop Me Now, Save Me, Crazy Little Thing Called Love. The list goes on and on, but it's got like all their great songs. In here is what we call the old school gatefold. So in here you've got like pictures of the group. All their singles, and it's one of their biggest selling albums in the UK. And I also have and you guys probably know as well, the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, and I've got right here is the soundtrack. And I'm sure most of you would have, well, if you haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody, I recommend giving it a watch because it's one of the greatest films that was ever put together. Rami Malek, who played Freddie Mercury, did a sensational job. But inside here there's like again the old school gatefold where it's got like pictures of the cast as well. Live Aid, because that's what the movie was about. Like it was about them leading up to their legendary performance in Live Aid in 1985, which I will get to in a minute. But so in the 80s, that they sort of changed their look a little bit. Like I think at that time Freddie had cut his hair short and grew out his mo, which he was well known for. And an interesting fact about that is Freddie actually grew that moustache because he wanted to cover up his teeth because he couldn't really close his mouth. And the media were at him all the time, and they were always like, "Oh, Freddie, like, when are you going to get your teeth fixed and stuff?" And he's like, "Well, if I get my teeth fixed, I won't be able to sing." So, Freddie, didn't listen to what the media had to say. He always lived his life the way he wanted, which was good for him, because, you don't want to have to deal with drama from the media when you're in the public eye. But, so in the 80s, they released an album called The Works, which is actually one of my favorite albums. And I think this album actually brought them back because I think they sort of had a bit of a break in between a few years because Freddie would have gone to do solo. But he didn't actually release his first album until 1985, which would have been the year they did Live Aid. And I think that album was called Mr. Bad Guy. Anyway, yeah, because Freddie would have done some solo albums, and I'm pretty sure Roger Taylor did one too. I think he was the first, but I can't remember what that album's called. So if you know the album that Roger Taylor released, if you could let me know in the comments, that would be great. But yeah, so when Queen released The Works in 1984, they had a song on there called Radio Gaga, and that was written by Roger Taylor, their drummer, because Roger was in the car with his, I think he was with his son, and he said Radio Kaka. So that's where that they got the idea to do Radio Gaga, and this it's a bit off topic as well, but that's where female singer Lady Gaga got her name from because she was inspired by Queen's Radio Gaga. So that's where the two and two came together. Anyway, so yeah, they released the album The Works, and Radio Gaga brought them back. You know, it was a big hit in the 80s, and I'm pretty sure at that time when they were doing Live Aid, the Works record would have been fresh. And Queen also, I don't have it on me today. I'll probably show you maybe on a show and tell video or something. But I've actually got this big Queen studio collection, and it's got all of their 15 studio albums throughout their career. Yeah, that they released 15 studio albums, I think from 1971 to 1995. But Freddie wasn't actually alive for their last album, and I think that last one was called Made in Heaven. And on that album, it's got a picture of the Montreux statue from Switzerland, because after Freddie died, they put a statue of him in Switzerland, which I've seen pictures of. It's a pretty cool attraction. Hopefully one day I'll be able to get there and see it. But yeah, so the Works album, with that time when they were doing Live Aid so a bit of a background about Live Aid. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so Live Aid was a concert that Bob Geldof from the Bushtown Rats organised, because at that time there was families in Africa and children who were dying of starvation, and Bob Geldof thought straight away, he's like, I need to do something. So Bob Geldof organised the Live Aid concert, and they had a pretty big lineup. It was held in two different countries. So they had Wembley Stadium in London, and then JFK Stadium in Philadelphia. And yeah, they had a huge lineup of artists. Like I think, well, Queen was one of the artists, because that's why I'm talking about Live Aid. Who else did they have? They had David Bowie. He was there. George Michael, Elton John. Yeah, they had a big lineup. But before Queen went on stage, they weren't making, like, their goal was to try and raise £1 million before 10 o'clock that night. And there were donations happening, but they weren't getting the money they needed. And as soon as Queen went on stage, but before they went on, Freddie was actually ordered by the doctors not to perform due to a vocal issue, but he ignored the doctor's advice and went on stage and gave a 20-minute legendary performance that we'll never forget. Like, I mean, it was before my time because I'm 26, but I've looked at footage from that 1985 concert, which would have been 40 years ago now, so 13th of July 1985, and that performance was probably the best to be at if you grew up in the 80s. And it's definitely something I would have liked to have seen, that's for sure. But speaking of live performances, I've also got this live album as well called Queen Rock Montreal, which was in 1981. And on the back, you've got the tracks. Yeah, and another really good live album I recommend. This one doesn't have the old school gatefold. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, it's another good live album I like listening to, because when you listen to a live album, you feel like you're there in the atmosphere amongst the crowd. And especially, when I watch their live performances. But over here, I've also got a book called the Neil Preston Photographs, where it's got like pictures of the band. So I'll just show you some quick photos. Here's Freddie in the 70s wearing don't know what outfit that is, but I gotta show you my favorite picture. It's here somewhere. This one of him with the guitar. So, and one fun little fact is, Freddie didn't really play the guitar much when he was on stage. He only played the guitar when they performed "Crazy Little Thing Called Love," and I only noticed that when they did Live Aid, because at the time when they had the works out, they were going to play their latest record, but Bob Geldof said, "Oh no, do not get clever. Do not play all your new stuff. Play all the old stuff that everybody knows, because that's what they pay to see." So how they sorted that set list out was because they would have only had 20 minutes. So I think they opened with Bohemian Rhapsody, but they didn't play the full 6 minute length. It was more like intro and then straight to the first verse, and then the second verse, and then after the second verse, when Brian May does his guitar solo, they just stopped at that, and then they went straight into Radio Gaga, which I thought was pretty clever, because even though that was a new song, it was a song that everyone knew at the time. So after Radio Gaga, they went with Freddie, being a sensational performer, he'd always liked to work a crowd with his AEOs and stuff. So after Radio Gaga, he went straight into entertaining the crowd by doing "Hey-oh" like that. And then they did Hammer to Fall, which was also from the Works album. And I should have said also Bohemian Rhapsody, that was from the classic A Night at the Opera, which was released in 1975. But there you go. And and then they released then they played "Crazy Little Thing Called Love," which was from the album The Game in 1980. And that's when Freddie played the guitar. I'm like, oh, I didn't know he played the guitar. Like, I thought he just played the piano and sang, but no, he played the guitar as well. And I noticed in that song, when they perform it live, Brian May uses 3 different guitars. So I think at the start he starts off with an acoustic guitar in his hand, and then he starts off with a Telecaster, which is like a black electric guitar. And forgive me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to remember from the documentaries I've watched. But and then he goes into his red special guitar that he actually built himself before joining Queen. And the red special guitar that he has, he actually built with his father, and that would be a guitar that he would take on the road with him every single day and perform gigs with. So, good job on making a really good guitar, Brian. And then after that they did "We Will Rock You," but they didn't do the whole song because they would have only had a 20-minute set. They basically just cut that one short as well. So when they sang the first verse, they just sang "We Will Rock You," and then they just dived straight into the guitar part of that song. And then they performed "We Are the Champions," and that would have been the final closing for their show, because whenever they do a live show, they always finish off with "We Are the Champions." And, because I think that's a great song to finish with. And a year later, Queen actually returned to Wembley for their own show called a Kind of Magic Tour. And I think that would have been the last tour that Freddie actually did with the group. And because at that time he got diagnosed with HIV, and he didn't know, it hadn't turned to AIDS at this point. But the thing is, back then in the 80s, if you got diagnosed with, HIV or AIDS, there was no cure for it. They didn't have the medication to treat you with it. But now in today's society, that has changed. But yeah, so they did that final tour with Freddie, and they did a legendary performance at Wembley Stadium, I think on the 11th and 12th of July, 1986. So that would have been, like the last time they did, almost a year later after doing Live Aid, because that was on the 13th of July, 1985. And that was a pretty special concert as well. When the way how Freddie came out with his yellow jacket on, and I'm sure you can tell I've got a Freddie Mercury top on that my auntie Rose had made for me. So thank you, Rose, for the lovely shirt. They did their shows at Wembley, and I think their last one would have been Nebworth Park on the 9th of August, I'm pretty sure it was, yeah. And after that, Freddie said, "I'm sorry, guys, I can't do live concerts anymore." And the band, that they didn't know what was wrong, because they just reached the biggest tour of their career, and sadly, Freddie became really fatigued and exhausted to continue on. And so after that they stopped touring, Freddie actually went away for a while. He went away to do some solo work. And as I mentioned earlier, there was that solo album he did, Mr. Bad Guy, in 1985, which would have been the same year as Live Aid. And at that time, so Freddie went away and did solo for a little while, and I think one of the solo songs he did was The Great Pretender, which is a great song. If you don't know it, I look it up. And he also did a fabulous duet with an opera singer, Spanish opera singer. I can't pronounce her name properly, so forgive me if I say it wrong. I think it was Montserrat. Again, sorry, hey guys, I can't say the name properly. But yeah, he did a fabulous duet with her. And I think a few years later, Freddie returned to Queen, and because at that time it would have officially been diagnosed with AIDS, I think in '87. And Freddie went to the band and said, "Look, guys, I do not want you to get upset or frown about my illness, because it could be seconds, wasting music, which is all I want to do with the time I have left. So we'll just keep working." So Freddie just wanted to keep working while he was sick, and good on him, absolute legend for that. And so that they released some albums, I think one in the late '80s called The Miracle, and Freddie actually had shaved his moustache off because he didn't care anymore about the media making fun of him. And in 1990 they released an album called not 1991, sorry, an album called Innuendo. And at that time Freddie was just very frail. He'd lost a lot of weight, but he didn't let his illness get the best of him. He just wanted to keep working. And when they were in the studio, I think Freddie had a massive shot of vodka, and that's what gave him the energy and his voice to sing one of their songs record one of their songs. I think it was called "The Show Must Go On," which is true because it does. It's even after when in a band, whether a singer dies, the show would continue on. But I think with Freddie, when he eventually passed on, he didn't want the band to stop. He wanted the band to continue on his legacy. And later on, like another guy who you probably know who's with Queen right now, Adam Lambert. And Adam Lambert, how he discovered Queen was he actually went to the movies with his dad and saw a movie called Wayne's World. They listened to Bohemian Rhapsody and they banged their heads to, and they cranked the volume in their car. And Adam Lambert was like, "Who's that band? Who sings this incredible song. And his dad's like, well, that's Queen. So that's how Adam Lambert discovered Queen. And I think when he was in his late 20s, he auditioned for American Idol, and he sang like the very first verse of Bohemian Rhapsody, and the judges were very impressed with his voice and his charisma. And again, even though he's not Freddie Mercury, like no one can replace Freddie. Like there's only one Freddie Mercury, and he's a god. But yeah, so after he auditioned for American Idol, he was then joined by bandmates Brian May and Roger Taylor for the American Idol finale, and that's when they performed "We Are the Champions." And I think maybe a few years later, he got asked to join the group, and I think that would have been in 2012. So he's been with the group for nearly 14 years now. And a couple of years later, like after that, they actually started touring with Adam Lambert, and I think that year they came to Australia for the first time with Adam Lambert. And when I first saw it, I was kind of not really against it, but I was kind of questioning why would they, come to Australia with it without their lead singer? Because usually, when a singer of a band dies, that's the end of the group. But Freddie didn't want Brian May or Roger Taylor to stop. And I think from that point, that's when they thought, we got to keep going. This is what Freddie wanted us to do. So that's why they have Adam Lambert. But sadly, their bass player, John Deacon, he's not part of the group anymore. He decided to quit because after losing Freddie, that really shattered him. And he was with them for the last gig. I think it was the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in 1992. And after that, which was raised for AIDS awareness, and after that, when they gave him the final send-off, John Deacon said, "I'm sorry guys, I can't continue anymore. Like we've just given Freddie our send-off, that's it for me, I gotta go." So sadly John Deacon's not with the group anymore, so it's just Brian May and Roger Taylor and Adam Lambert. But when I saw that they were doing an Australian tour, I was questioning why. But anyway, and I didn't see them back then, but then I think they came to Australia again another time after that, and I thought, yeah, it still won't be the same without Freddie. But not long before their next Australian tour, there was a documentary on TV that I actually had a look at, and it changed my whole perspective on Adam Lambert, because there was some footage on there where he actually went off stage and everyone booed him, and he actually came back on stage and said, "Look guys, I know what you are thinking, and you probably aren't comfortable with me being up here performing the songs with Brian May and Roger, but the truth be told is I'm not Freddie Mercury. I am not trying to be him. I'm trying to be myself. I'm here to celebrate the music of Queen and the legacy of Freddie Mercury." And after that, everyone started cheering. And again, you can't replace someone with a voice like Freddie, because nobody has that high operatic range. But Adam Lambert is pretty good. So when I watched that documentary, it changed my whole perspective on how I felt about Adam Lambert being with the group. And I think in 2020, right before the pandemic, when COVID spread throughout the world, they did an Australian tour. And I think this time they were performing in the stadiums again, because I think the last couple of tours they performed in indoor arenas, but this time they were performing in the stadium. And I thought, I got to get to the Rhapsody tour. This is going to be a sick gig. Anyway, not long after that, it was announced that they were in the lineup for the firefight concert, which was raised for the bushfires that were affecting all around Australia. And I thought, I got to get to that the next day too. So not only that same weekend, I went to see Queen and Adam Lambert for their own show, but I got to see them at Firefight the next day for their 20-minute set, because they had a big lineup of artists, and I can't name them all. But on that day, Queen and Adam Lambert actually had recreated the 1985 iconic set list from Live Aid. And as soon as I heard that intro from Bohemian Rhapsody, I knew straight away they're going to do the Live Aid set list again, no doubt. And they did. And it was a little bit different, but during that set list, they put a little cameo of Freddie Mercury up on screen doing his like AOs and interacting with the crowd, like from the Wembley show in 1986, and it just felt like he was there in spirit, you know. And I probably should have mentioned this to you earlier, but Freddie Mercury wasn't, well, I probably did say it, but he wasn't originally called Freddie Mercury. His real name was Farrokh Bulsara, and you know, which is I think Indian Persian name from his parents, but yeah, he didn't want to be called Farrokh. He wanted to change his name to Freddie, and he didn't like the family name either, so he then reinvented himself, changed it to Mercury and got a new passport, and that's where the name Freddie Mercury came from, and which I thought was, you know, pretty clever, you know. And yeah, but the thing is, for him growing up, he was not called Freddie or Farrokh. As you would have heard me say earlier, he got called Bucky. But yeah, going back to the Firefight concert, you know, seeing Queen and Adam Lambert twice in that one weekend, it was a very magical moment, and I really hope they do end up back here again soon in the future. But yeah, that brings us to an end of another episode of Ben's World. Come live in it. If you guys have a favorite song of Queen, drop below in the comments. Let me know what your favorite Queen song is and why you're a fan. But yeah, I'll see you next time for another episode of Ben's World. Come live in it.
Hi everyone, Ben here from Ben's World. Come live in it. Thank you for tuning in each fortnight. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode. Feel free to like and subscribe, and if you have any questions, please comment below, as I would love to hear your feedback. Have a great day, and remember, it's Ben's World. Come live in it.